So this is kind of a abstract-ish topic. It's sort of like figuring out kind of your own path, figuring out your core values, and just sort of staying true to the kind of person you want to be without worrying too much about what other people think of you or your or getting influenced to go down different paths.
Yes.
So I was thinking, the idea of having core values. So core values are sort of like these kind of background things that are sort of in your subconscious mind that sort of like, well, they could be in your conscious mind if you actually physically list all your core values, but you sort of have like a list of things that you do and things that you don't do, things that you will do, things that you won't do. So it kind of determines the decisions you make in life. So if say, for example, like racking paint doesn't align with your core values, then, you buy paint, but outside influences can kind of make you kind of want to do things that go against your own core values. So when you talk about the idea of core values, they're unique to every individual. So as far as one person's concerned, like racking paint is totally in line with their core values. Fuck big corporations and their greed and all that shit. I'm going to steal the paint from them. And whereas another person may have a different perspective on that. And they may be like, look, I just want to pay for the things that I use. And that's just a different path. Neither one is wrong or neither one is right. They're unique to the individual. So what you and I were talking about was sort of getting sort of thrown into this weird culture of graffiti, and you have all these people with all these different kind of value systems, whereas, one person has these values, another person has these values, and everybody has their own kind of set of values. It's kind of dragging a little bit, but so it's really easy for somebody to kind of go against their core values based on influence from within the culture, especially now with the internet and stuff. So now racking paint, I'm not going to give you an opinion on what you should do. That's like your choice. You do whatever you want to do. But I'm going to use that as an example. So you'll have somebody that doesn't want to rack paint, but his homie is calling him a toy because he buys his paint. Like only real writers rack paint. And nobody says only real writers buy paint. It's not a thing. I mean,
right.
So there's that influence, to not buy things, or I'm starting to feel like I'm saying that you shouldn't rack. Like I'm not saying that. I'm just kind of using it as an example that
to kick off that peer pressure, the influence that should be disregarded, like you said, in the sense of, and if we're talking about graffiti culture, like anything else that's evolved over time, things are finessed, things are massaged, things are filtered until you find your recipe. Even though things may have been that way when you were growing up, there was a label put on how and why and when you do what you do. Over time, we've all understood and realized how that has evolved and has a whole nother approach now. But we can still bring it back to what you're saying, because I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that still have that same mentality, and, whether they can or can't even afford to, pay for their own supplies, they still have that mentality where like that's how our crew does. You rack your shit, you get it from here. This is how you do it. And if you ain't doing it, you ain't down with us, or you're a toy or whatever. And it's like, miss me with all that shit. How important it is to be able to grasp, to harness your own feeling, like what we're gonna kick off here, which is what you're saying. Fuck what they're saying.
Yeah.
If these are a group of cats that are trying to make you or push you to do these things, this ain't the crew for you anyway. If they can respect that you feel, you know what, I don't think that's a good idea, and you don't gotta fucking explain yourself either. No, I'll pay for my shit. I'll go fucking get a job and I'll pay for my shit. And your piece might come out better still. You know, like
Right.
it's not going to determine if you got skills or if you got motivation or dedication or if you're about this shit. So it's like,
Well, and not to get too far into the
Okay.
that racking thing. Not
Yeah.
not that it's not relevant. I don't want people to think that that's really
No.
what we're talking about, but it's sort of like
It's an example.
it's an example of like the influence. So you could kind of like put that on all kinds of different shit. Like if they say, oh, if you don't do this kind of graffiti, like you've seen memes where it says you're not a real graph writer unless XYZ.
Right.
And I see those and it's comical to me because it's kind of like,
I'd love to see the dude who made that.
yeah. And it's like, how are you the authority on,
Yeah.
you know, I understand that there's certain things like that separate, you know, like a street artist and a graffiti writer. And there's certain kind of things in there. And there's all kinds of, you know, if somebody only bombs black books, you know, like it's not really the same thing as somebody that kind of does all of the traditional streets and all this kind of thing. And like racking kind of comes into that. Like racking is sort of like part of the culture as well.
Right.
But at the same time, it's kind of like, even if all you wanted to do was bomb black books, like you don't have to like, I mean, you have to understand that you won't be quite the same, and not saying better or worse, but like, you know, you won't really fit into certain categories if like that's all you do. And that's kind of like an extreme example. But even if you think like somebody that only does legal pieces, like, you know, if that's your lane, then that's your lane. You know, there's no reason to get out of it unless you want to. So I think what I would like for people to kind of get a grasp on is like this perspective that you don't have when you're young, where, you know, as a youngster, you don't really have perspective. So you have like your first 5 years, you don't even remember. And then the next 10 years, now you're 15. Those 10 years, you don't really get a whole lot of life experience. So then you start doing graffiti and you're going into that without very much perspective. So most people are pretty susceptible to these kind of influence and going down paths that maybe don't fit in. And even as a young person, you may not have like your core values set in place, but like your gut often will tell you, you know, that's not something I want to do. So whatever that is, there's thousands of examples of it. I think what I would like, and I think what we would like, is to kind of give people an idea that following your own path isn't a bad thing, regardless if it lines up with what other people think is the right path. Because there's this weird thing with people that they think like, this is the way I do it, so this is the way everybody's supposed to do it, or my way is the real way, and my way is the best way. So then they look down on people that don't do it in the same way as they do. And I think it's pretty, you see that a lot in graph.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely you see that in graffiti. And, you know, I think one thing that's important to teach and to learn at a young age is that everybody has their strength. There's a strength in every field, in every category, in every, you understand what I'm saying? Everybody's got their position and their place. And like you said, like you may not fit into this position. This may not be your strength, but you can drive hard in that, get that, you know, excel in what you love to do and what you feel is your lane and what your intuition tells you. This is where I belong. This is where I want to pursue my whatever. Yeah. You don't, there's no mayor of Graffville telling anyone like, this is not, you can't, you won't, you shouldn't, like, please, you know, focus on your own shit.
Yeah. It's sort of it's kind of a limiting thing, like, especially if you're young and you're hanging around with a bunch of people that do certain kind of things. Like if, you know, if you're not doing the same kind of things as they are, and you're sort of they're giving you a hard time about it. And it's kind of like, it's sort of easy to be like, all right, fine. You know, like I don't really want to hang off a bridge, but everybody else is hanging off the bridge, so I guess that's what I'm supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we all did that. I mean, I have an example of just that. Like, that's what I saw. That's what people were doing, all kinds of crazy shit. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to try it, you know? So I fucking climbed my ass out on a bridge, and I'm leaning over and doing a throwy on the 10 freeway, and there's cars shooting by underneath me. And I had this feeling that was really interesting. It was like, obviously there was fear, because like if my left hand slipped, I was dead. That was only the fingers on my left hand that were grabbing the fence was the only thing that was keeping me from falling into these cars going 70, 80 miles an hour. But this other feeling crept in. It was the gut feeling that was telling me, this is not what you're supposed to be doing. And I had this weird feeling that I was like, if I continue doing this kind of stuff, this is how I'm going to die. And it was a different feeling. Like a fear is it's obvious. Mm-hmm. The gut feeling, if you listen to it and you pay attention to it, it's a different thing. It's not the same as being fearful of getting smashed like Frogger on the freeway, you know? Most people listening probably won't even know what Frogger is.
Game, yeah.
But
fucking Frogger.
But anyway, so when I was up there on the bridge, that gut feeling crept in, and I was like, if I keep doing this I'm going to die. Mm-hmm. So I finished, and then I climbed my ass off of it, and I said, I'm never doing that again. And I never did. So fast forward maybe a year, I think it was probably maybe even that same year, GK hit me up, and this is a famous spot that GK and Saber did. Mm-hmm. It was those big rollers across the 5 freeway.
Sure. And
so I was supposed to do that spot with GK. So he hits me up. We're going to do these top to bottoms. We're going to lean over the train bridge, roll in our names. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And then he's like, then we're going to climb out and outline them. And I was like, no. I said, why can't we just do the rollers, man? They'll be big. And like, he was pretty much like, no, you got to get out there and outline them and highlight them. It'll be dope. Mm. And so I was like, I'm out. I'm not doing that. Like, I had made this decision. My gut was telling me, don't do that shit. It's not for you. They went on to do it, and that fucking spot rocked, man. I mean, it was like, they got so much fame out of it. It was huge. Like, it wasn't something that was, you just didn't see it at the time.
No.
These huge fucking blockbusters, like unmissable. Mm-hmm. But what was interesting about it is, like, you would think that I would look at that with regret and think that I would look at it like, that could have been my name up there. That should have been mine. I should have done that. I should have gone out and done that. But that feeling that I had when I was on the bridge before was so strong that I was like, I'm glad I didn't do that, because I probably would have died. That was probably what my gut was telling me not to do. So had and of course you can't know, there's no way. This is the kind of thing where if I didn't listen to my gut, obviously I would know if it went bad for me. I don't know if it would have gone bad for me, but I believe deep down, even to this day, that would have been the end of it for me. So that could be some weird hocus pocus shit. I believe it. I always look back on that as like, you know, I really feel like that was a real thing, and I don't know what it is. Like, do you ever have those kind of gut feelings, like where and it's like almost literally in your stomach. You're like, something is going on, man.
Yeah.
Like, I feel it, you know?
There's one that stands out where a partner and I were doing this, I don't know how you kind of describe it. It almost looked like a waffle grid of concrete indented squares on the side of the freeway. So we had to climb up these like waffle squares to get to the top ledge to hit this particular spot. And I think I was just above my boy. He was just behind me. So I was going first. And I noticed that every so often, like a little piece of these little squares was loose and would come out of the wall. And because it was so old, there was little broken pieces. So I kept telling him, like, I kept feeling in my gut, like, fuck, maybe we shouldn't be climbing this, dude, because there's just no telling which one of these is going to give out, whether it's our hands or our feet. So I remember telling him, like, bro, make sure whenever you go to reach that you grip it and you wiggle it and shit before you keep going. And do the same thing with your feet, because these are falling out. Like, follow my exact, So I like tell him that, and my gut and my heart and everything else is telling me, like, yeah, maybe you should at least fucking grip these things and wiggle this shit before you move. And if you don't, maybe you guys should just fucking cut. Maybe you should go somewhere else. And I remember feeling that again and again. Sure enough, we get to the top, we're filling in, we're, moving forward, trying to be as quick as we possibly can. And I don't take my own advice. First of all, we don't leave. Second of all, I don't check before I go reaching for something. And my palms sweat when I even just talk about this shit. So when I go to reach for one of them, sure enough, it slides right out of the wall and down I go. And it was quite a fucking fall too.
You fell down that whole shit?
Oh, the whole grid. And it was a concrete gutter at the bottom, so it was just straight down to cement. And my boy, because we were just like a foot we were just like a foot and a half away from each other, because he was I think he was just finishing his fill to the end of his set, and I was to the right of him, and I was outlining the beginning, so we were just like a foot from each other at that point. So we're probably saying something to each other, like, do, 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 do. And then all of a sudden, just, woof, I'm just gone. It took him a minute to like climb down to like make sure I was alive, because I guess I was still. And when I got down, he tells me the story. He says, when I got down to you, I mean, you would think anybody like who wasn't cuckoo would be like, yo, let's break. Like, this is too much. Like, come pick me up. Like, I'm half dead right now. But he's like, you okay? You all right? I'm just like, come closer. Come closer. He's like, I'm like, finish my letters. He's just like, what the fuck? And then by the time he went back up and finished his, and by the time he made it to mine, I ended up crawling back up and we finished and whatever. But whatever, dude. Should we have bounced when I thought, yeah. Could I have hit my head on a sprinkler or this or that? Absolutely. Let me fast forward to another spot that was the same thing. And here's the funny thing, is like, this was like years in the making that I thought to myself, I have to have this spot. I have to catch this spot. I'll do it when the time's right. I'll do it when all the elements just line up, when it's just the right time. And I was with some friends in the backyard, doing our usual Friday night dance, what those things were, all the little extracurricular fuckery. So I wasn't in a clear head. And I had this, epiphany. Tonight's the night, it's got to happen tonight. I just feel it. It's just right. Even though my gut's telling me, like, yeah, maybe it's not. Maybe you should wait till you're on point. Maybe you should just wait till you're clear-headed and all these things. Not to mention that this particular spot required rock climbing gear, which I was ill-equipped. I did not literally, but I like did not know how to use this shit properly. I think I practiced it off a roof in like a backyard once, maybe. So I was nowhere near being able to use this stuff. But again, my ego and my peers and my whoever else was around, it just like hyped me up. So that was like all overpowering that gut feeling that I had. Like, no, this is probably not a good idea. Not to mention the drugs and everything else. And then we geared up. We got to the spot. It was like a 45-minute drive just to get there. The whole way there, the vibe was cool. We're all lit. Music's bumping. We're having a good night. But I'm still feeling like, I didn't know if it was like because of the scale of this spot or if I should be listening to my fucking gut here. Like, maybe this is not the right night. We get there. We set everything up. Get ready to be dropped off in position. And I had two boys with me. One was doing one thing. The other was doing another to make it all, go together. And I forgot my fucking supplies. I forgot the backpack and the fucking paint back 45 minutes back. Okay, so if there wasn't already a sign before we left the pad on the way to the spot, now it was like, all right, homeboy, check it out. It's not the night. Don't do it. Go home, chill out, take sleep a little bit, get your head right. No, fuck that. Let's get it. We'll fucking drive back and fucking get the bag. And so anyway, fast forward, we ended up going back, grabbing the supplies, driving back to the spot, tying up, doing the damn thing. But again, I was so hyped up on like the feeling of trying to shut down that voice in my head that was telling me maybe just not. Maybe not tonight. Maybe this ain't your path tonight. Maybe you shouldn't be doing this. Tomorrow's another day. Maybe it's a different spot. Whatever. I was so obsessed with shutting that fucking voice down, I forgot to put on gloves, which was key for the beginning of this to get to the fucking spot from point A to point B. And I got some incredible rope burn because I wasn't wearing these gloves because of a slide down from A to B, right? So then at that point, should I have fucking abandoned ship and listened to my gut at that point? Absolutely. I still didn't. I still continued to execute this particular spot. Not only, now that I'm thinking about it, not only that, but somebody got pulled over right underneath me at that same moment. So right when I fucked up my hands and now I'm about to do the spot, someone was pulled over directly beneath us. So there was like just one sign, one God shot after another, whatever you want to call it, right? Fucking ridiculous. So yeah, again, my fucking the pressure of pursuing a path or completing a mission that I might not necessarily have been mine in the first place was overwhelming. So it's like, it didn't matter how many signs were coming at me. I just like refused this invincibility, this feeling of like superhuman, whatever the fuck it was incredible. Anyway, so I don't want to drag this out. I'm just trying to find the value in not listening to that voice, right? Not listening to that gut feeling. So once I finished and it was time to head back up, I needed, obviously, strong hands to get back to point A. And they were so torn. They were so burnt by the ropes. My nerves were exposed and they were like literally twitching and opening and closing by themselves. So all it was, like you were talking about, that one hand that's holding onto the fence, that's like your only saving grace. Well, I had two at that point because I'm going up. They both just opened on their own. Like the nerves just twitched and just literally opened. And I just free fell backwards. And I remember thinking that in my head, like it felt like a 20-minute drop. It was probably 4 seconds, right? It felt like I had all these thoughts going, how did I not listen to that voice in my head yesterday, 2 hours ago, 1 hour ago, 10 minutes ago, all those things. Fuck, my family's going to find me hanging from the spot. This is going to be my last fucking spot right here. Anyway, luckily the rope didn't catch where it should have, which would have been devastating, but it did force me to have to cut it and fall another distance at some point. And again, I could have lost my life on 3, 4, or 5 different points of that entire spot. But it was all because of me not listening to that fucking gut and that intuition that told me to turn around and wait. And, it's hard to have like a honest perspective and tell you that I wish I didn't do it, okay? Because like, I don't know if we touched on this when we were recording or if this is going to be new to this session, but a lot of us can relate on, I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it wasn't for these things. And I respect that and I believe that to be true in a lot of ways. Although, if I were giving somebody else advice, if I was making a suggestion to anybody else who was in this life, listen to your fucking gut. When in doubt, say no. If you're not even quite sure, if you're not 100% experienced, if you're not all these fucking things, I wouldn't suggest it. We can't tell anybody what to do, but had I known, then what I know now, I would have stayed home. I would have been on point. I'm not going to say I wouldn't have done it. I used to climb the highest spots when I was fucking 4 or 5 years old. I'd find the highest tree and like my goal would be to get to the top fucking branch and like swing off of this and that. So I've always had that part in me. But yeah, listening to your gut. I don't know how far off track I may have gone, but that is an example. It's definitely an example.
It's a good example. Yeah. And I think there's kind of a lot to be said about a fucking lot of things, especially things that we've covered. And it's kind of like we've covered it in another episode. I think it was the mindset episode where you were talking about regrets and burn bridges and, all these kind of things. And I got the sense that you sort of wished you hadn't have done all those things and sort of the response from me was like, you know, you don't know what would have happened. Like, so let's say, so we have this perspective now, and you have this perspective. Your hands work fine, you know, everything works fine, and you made it out the other side. So it's not so much about like, do you regret that spot? Not so much. I mean, everything worked out, but there were some clear indicators that were warning you that there was some kind of danger, you know, or something. Granted, it didn't turn out as bad as it could have, obviously, but it is a good example of like, you know, it very easily, you could have not listened to your gut and you could be paralyzed or you could be dead, you know? So, I think those are two examples of gut feelings and stuff. And it's sort of also, I guess, could kind of lead to, you would have done that stuff anyway. Like that's the stuff that you wanted to do. Like you said, when you were a kid, you were climbing up shit. To me, it's if we're saying that people have paths, and obviously like we don't know that, if that's kind of what we're talking about, is maybe like you had a lane of doing sort of like what they quote daredevil graffiti, like when Fox 11 called it or whatever. Sure. That was kind of your lane. That was what you were going to do. For me, that wasn't my lane at all. And I kind of realized that when I was hanging off the bridge that time. I was like, this isn't for me. Like I don't get that fucking adrenaline rush from it. And even when I drove by it, I looked at it and I'm like, all right, it didn't suit me, you know? So I feel fortunate that I decided at that point that it wasn't really what I was going to do. But there was a lot of things that I did and a lot of kind of like ways that I acted and behavior that was influenced by what I thought I was supposed to be doing. There's a certain kind of like way that you carry yourself as a graph writer. And, you know, so you start to think like, oh, well, this is how I'm supposed to carry myself. And this is how I'm supposed to act in this situation, or this is the kind of things I'm supposed to be doing. But the reality is like everybody has their own path. And I think we have this kind of fear of standing out. And it's kind of, I read this in a book, and I think it's kind of a weird example here, but like they were talking about not being afraid to stand out. Because like a lot of people, they don't want, like we were talking about with drugs and stuff. So like a lot of people will not want to be the only one that's not doing the drugs. Like if they're in a room and everybody's doing this one thing, they don't want to be the one person that's like, no, I don't want to do it. And everyone's, oh, you fucking this and that. You don't want to be that person. But if people weren't willing to stand out and kind of be their own person, there's a lot of things that may not have been kicked off. And one of them, the example in this book, I'm not giving this example because I think it's a little bit stronger than what we're talking about, but like the civil rights movement, Rosa Parks was like, fuck you, I'm not going to sit in the back of the bus. Like she wasn't scared to stand up for herself. And I don't know if this is a good...
It might be.
The civil rights movement is like such a huge deal. I kind of feel like maybe...
Yeah, but it's not so much the size as much as how many people are aware of that and can probably understand what you're trying to pull from it.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not so much, I'm not comparing some of this dumb shit like whether to rack or not,
right,
to the civil rights movement. I'm just saying like...
standing your ground and being your own person.
Being your own, yeah. I mean, it's like, it's important to do that, and it can be a big deal for your own individual's life. Not being afraid to stand out and not being afraid to kind of like do the kind of thing that you want to do, especially in graph culture. If hitting the streets every night is not your thing, then don't do that. If hitting the streets is your thing, then fucking, you know, understand the risks you're taking, but I'm not going to tell you what to do. Like, I'm not going to tell you not to do it, but if you're one of those people that are only doing that stuff because you think, if you're only doing that stuff because of sort of outside influences, it's not necessary. You know what I mean? It's not necessary to be to be kind of that let other people kind of dictate the path that you take in life. So if you're overly concerned about being labeled as, you know, this kind of writer or that kind of writer, or if the fucking Jimmy Jimbo 127 is going to fucking tell you you're not a real graph writer because you didn't do this kind of graph. I mean, that's just being older. It gives you a lot more perspective. And I didn't have that perspective when I was younger. I feel like I've always been very analytical. So like the way that I did illegal graph was consciously seeing, you know, houses getting raided and doors getting kicked in and people doing long jail terms and even prison time. When I saw that stuff happening, I was like, I don't want to go to jail ever. I fucking definitely don't want to go to prison. Like I never felt like that was something. I never had that I don't give a fuck if I go to jail attitude. I was like, anything but that. Like, let me just stay out here, you know? So the way that I went about doing illegal graph was always with that in mind, you know, like, you know, I would kind of stick to more cutty spots, more areas that were like heavily bombed or walls that were already, you know, smashed with tags and throwies and all that stuff. And I would get myself a little spot there. I mean, there are exceptions. I did some clean walls and, you know, some of the sound walls right on the side of the freeway and, you know, different things like that, that probably somewhat caught the attention of the people that were keeping track of stuff. But for the most part, I never had that I don't give a fuck attitude that like some of my peers had. But you were making a good point. It's sort of the flip side. Like we were talking about not being afraid to stand out, you know, and do kind of your own thing.
Right.
But on the flip side of that, what you were starting to talk about is like being the one that's pressuring people and feeling like other people need to do what you.
Yeah. And yeah, man. And you can relate this. I can relate this to everything in my life. Cause I when I was younger, there was definitely pressure like we all get when we're young, right? Peer pressure to fit in, to be a part of all those false, misguided notions, right? And I remember when I was young, like how disrespectful and how fucked that felt to be treated that way from somebody else. Like, fuck you. You don't know me. You don't know what I want to do. But because you want to fit in, because you want to be a part of, you just kind of adjust and acclimate and adopt those fucked up teaching or following or whatever you want to call that. And you adjust to it, right? It's like the first time you go out and hit this particular spot, you're a little shaky, you're a little like watching out a little bit more, you're a little like, oh fuck. And then every time you pull it off, you're a little more comfortable, you get a little more settled in that ground. I remember feeling so offended by being bullied and then later adopting that same mentality. And because of drugs and because of that misguided teaching, I adopted that and then started pushing that in my life. And I mean, it carried on into my very, very recent years and how I treat those closest to me. And like, I didn't see it until now, like how you reflect that kind of bully, that pushy fucking mentality. And it's such the wrong way to, I'm going to say wrong. I'm not going to say it's if you want to. It's like, it really is not the right way to approach anything, because to anyone's benefit, if you treat somebody like, yo, they got their own master plan, they got their own position, they got their own strength, it's going to benefit you as well. Like you empower somebody and you I believe that if you support whatever somebody's drive, position, motivation, and passion is in whatever they do, we're talking graffiti here. So this cat doesn't climb. This cat likes to do characters on the ground, and that's his fucking thing. Fuck yeah, support that. Be a part of that. Do something up there. If you want to climb that shit, climb that shit. Do something that supports that character down there. Like somehow collaborate. That character's pointing to the spot you guys are hitting up there. You know, there's always like something you can find from that. So what I'm saying is, fuck trying to push somebody or bully somebody into thinking that they need to be in this lane and down this path that might not be for them. they're already on their right path. They can still be part of that group or that crew or that organization and have their own strong point. If we all had the exact same fucking strong point, that'd be a very uninteresting crew to look at anyway. It'd be
and a culture
and
would not be
culture,
interesting.
exactly. That's where was I going with that? Okay, so yeah, as far as I'm concerned, that versatility within a crew as a collective, it doesn't have to be one writer that can do all these things. I'm not saying that's a bad thing either. Beautiful. If you got that kind of flexibility and you're willing to, and you're well versed in all these different angles, hats off. Beautiful, man. You can inspire all these other different whatever, right? But if you're just driven in to pursue this particular direction, that doesn't mean it's only one thing. It just means that's one direction, this is another. Go get it. In my opinion, there should be no, you can't, you shouldn't, you know, especially when you are like the leader of a crew or you're one of the top cats or you're the one who's well known in your neighborhood or in your area. These youngsters look up to you and they take what you're saying seriously, whether you think so or not. I mean, to some degree, of course, but I sure as fuck did. Those who came before me, I took what they said very seriously. If there was some individuals like yourself, if there was more people that were taking that approach of, nah, I don't need a hit, you just pass that, or no, I'm good, you guys enjoy that, like, and I could see that more often. You know, I think that's one thing that we can shine more today than ever before. Again, there's some people out there that can enjoy those things. Good for them. There's some people whose lives will come crashing down because of it. So being aware of that and knowing that you don't got to be either or. You don't have to be this to be an amazing writer. You don't have to smoke this shit to be an incredible artist and to be very successful at what you do. What I wanted to also touch on, not only how important it is to lead by example in a sense that, whatever you're driven by, whatever fuels your soul, and what you want to perfect or what you want to master or whatever you want to do, support that. If you're his partner, if you're his mentor, whatever it is, there's something. How did I just start that?
Well, you were kind of going on some interesting stuff. Like you were talking about something that I had read recently. I might even read it this morning, where it was talking about how, what was it? You had said something that I thought was interesting. It was like how you were super offended about being bullied and kind of pushed in a certain direction, but then you found yourself doing the same thing to other people later. So that's like a characteristic that happens in humans, and I mean maybe in other species too, but like the oppressor becomes the oppressed becomes the oppressor, and it's kind of a common thing. And you've seen it. You can look back in history and see a lot of examples of that. So there's something that happens to you when you're being pushed or whatever the case may be. So I think in the book, the example that I was reading was like people get so locked in on their belief systems that like they aggressively want other people to follow them. And that's kind of like why a lot of wars are fought. And that's kind of why a lot of religions are at odds with each other, because like they feel like other people believing something entirely different than them, it threatens what they have. So whether it's religion or just a certain set of values. So you have like cultures that come up in these like really rugged, like tough places to live. And so that the people, their mentality is like, it's tough. And they have this set way of like how life is. But then you have other cultures that it's like a whole different vibe. It's like a family and they're feasting, inviting friends and kissing each other on the face. And it's just all this like whole different kind of perspective. And when those two things kind of collide, I don't know if that's the right example, but like wars are fought over these completely different value systems. So what happens is and I don't know, this is something that I think I read, and I hope I'm understanding it right. But like, as somebody starts getting dominated, like in a war situation, they start feeling like they're supposed to be dominating people. So like, if you're in a situation where you're oppressed, whether it's by being bullied or whatever, there's kind of like, I don't want to say natural, but like there's a possibility that you will transition into being that person, you know? So like what you're saying right there kind of makes sense. Like if you're getting kind of pushed around a lot, and then you get to the point where you're wanting to push other people around. So I think it's an important other side of the coin. So we were already talking about saying, go your own path. Don't worry about these people talking shit, or this guy says you got to do this kind of graffiti, or you're a toy, or you got to fucking do this or steal that, or whatever it is. Don't be afraid to kind of stand out and do your own thing. But on the flip side, don't be that asshole that's like trying to push the way that you think things are supposed to be on everybody else. Cause it's like, that's your belief system. I mean, to a certain degree, if somebody's doing something that's like damaging to the culture,
right,
then I can kind of understand.
Yeah.
But if it's like, if you didn't write on this particular thing in this particular era, you're not a real graph writer. Or if you're kind of, I mean, I don't know, that's kind of a mild thing. Like, you want to say that.
I get you.
Whatever. But like, if you're kind of pushing somebody to like do a certain kind of thing, and pushing somebody to do certain activities that are outside of what they're comfortable with, that's not a good way to go about things. I mean, not for us as a species, or as a graph culture, or just as, fellow inhabitants of the fucking earth. It's just not a good way to be, like, pushing your own personal belief systems on other people.
And it's like, this is not like a Boy Scout approach to this situation. Like, first of all, you got people sitting at your table because you believe in them in the first place. You recruited this cat as a prospect, he's a whatever, because you see whatever you see in this person. So once they're at your table, I mean, this is just my opinion. People could run things however they want. But as far as I'm concerned, if we all took this mentality as far as supporting the next guy and what his strong points are, not forcing him to do something that's because in the same sense, if you're forcing him into a corner to do this, you might be missing completely the brightest fucking part of what this guy can bring to the crew, or what his potential is. Like, let him, teach him, show him, guide him, inspire him, but let him shine a little bit himself too. You got to give him a little bit of breathing room. You can't completely suffocate with all your, just like we try to do. It's like we've really tried to censor ourselves while still keeping an honest conversation going back and forth, but still understanding that we're not trying to throw a pillowcase over anybody's particular program and let you know, like, it should be this way. That's not, and if it ever felt that way, that's the furthest thing from what we're trying to do. However, you still want to guide somewhat,
Well, and I hear it a lot that, the guidance and mentorship and all that stuff has always been a big part of the culture. And it's a big part of, like, every fucking, like Steve Grody said, like, if you want to be a woodworker, like, you should get a mentor that's fucking super good at woodworking. And
right.
So, it doesn't mean that everything that mentor is saying is exactly right. You'll get the information from them, and then you do with it what you want, and that kind of ties into sort of what we're getting at is, like, there's all these different paths you can take. And so, like, if what we're saying sounds fucking ridiculous, then, hey, it's not for you. That's fine. It's not going to be for everybody. I mean, like, we were talking about those little videos that I put on social media, and I have people calling me a toy, or like they'll see that I do my wabi sabi thing, and they think it's because I don't have can control, and it's just like, this is not for you then. If that's if that's what you're looking at, then that's fine. Like, I'm putting this out there anyway, because, like, there's other people that may get value from it. So to your point, if this all sounds like touchy-feely bullshit and you're like, fuck that, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, then that's your lane and that's fine. You know, we're not going to, you know, if you're a bully and you're being a dick to everybody, then fuck you. Cause like, you know, I don't like that shit.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I'm not telling you not to do it. I mean,
Right.
well, maybe I am. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's to take it one step further, even what we would appreciate, because again, this entire situation, the reason why we exist right now behind a microphone and what we're trying to do is to provide value. And what we would appreciate is, imagine yourself sitting at this table with us right now. Give us some feedback. Let us know if there's something we're missing from this conversation, if there's something that should be added, which brings me to this. With that information, we grow from, and you don't got to take it or leave it. Like we can get perspectives, we get opinions, and just like you guys are from us. And then you can filter out and process what you want and what you don't want. Maybe there's some shit that'll stay and some shit you'll leave, just like anything else in life. But I think hearing everybody's idea and perspective is how you find those sweet spots and those strong points, right?
There's another guy that I follow and I've talked about him, Jocko Willink, I think is how you say his name. I've read his books. I've fucking listened to his podcast, and he does this thing that's pretty cool where he allows users to send questions. And I kind of thought that might be something interesting for us to do.
Yeah.
People could email us questions, and if we feel like it's in line with what we're going to talk about, we will read the question and answer the question to the best of our ability, and then mention who submitted the question. Would you be down to do that?
Yeah. Especially, I mean, yeah, anything that they send that's of value, absolutely. We should, unless they want to remain anonymous. Yeah. I think it's really important to understand that we want everyone to feel like they're sitting at this table. That's what this is all about. Everybody's
It's a conversation with the culture.
Exactly.
You know, or people that are enthusiastic, or the culture enthusiasts, if that's, you know,
right,
whatever your fucking thing is. And so let's do that.
Yeah, there's no wrong questions.
No wrong questions. We're not going to answer every single one of them.
Like where do babies come from might not get feedback.
Yeah. It's like you should ask your mom that shit. Yeah. So, you know, if you actually listen to the podcast and you have a good understanding about it, I mean, send a question anyway, but we're not going to answer every question. Like, you know, there's certain things we want to cover and certain things we kind of just, you can get elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So let's do that then. Send any questions you have to a machine Send any questions you have to machinestudios@gmail.com. That's machinestudios@gmail.com. And if we like the question and we feel like it's on point with what we're trying to do here, then we will answer the question and talk about it. Maybe it'll even turn into an episode. Like, we're interested in knowing like what kind of stuff you as listeners would like to hear. And if you like what we're doing, I mean, do us a solid, you know, tell some fucking motherfuckers about it, you know, help us get this information out there. Like we keep saying, it's like, it's not wrong or right. I mean, this is what we feel are topics that could help the culture move forward. And if you feel the same way, then, you know, please just, you know, give us a shout out. And also, I can't name everybody, but like fucking sincere thank you to everybody that has been. Cause like every time we drop an episode, people throw that up on their stories. You know, we get DMs, and Cub and I both get DMs, and then we get DMs on the Machine Studio page.
That's right.
So we, you know, we were very thankful for those who are already doing it. And
that's right.
And then more of you guys help us out.
Yeah, no doubt.
We would appreciate it very much.
Shit, well said. Those who have been supporting us, from day one, as we lay this foundation, will not be forgotten. And we are at this moment thinking of ways that we can, reach back and thank you properly. And yeah, man, it's a beautiful day. Grateful to be able to be sitting at this table and have this opportunity to run our fucking mouths.
Yeah. All right. Well, then we're out.
Stay up.
All right, then.
Yeah.